Welcome to another episode of Still Talking. I'm your host, Kicker Shaver. I am here again live to present to you episode 4 of the series that we have been doing on the temperaments of Hippocrates dating way back in the 300 to 400 year range. So here we are going into scientist mode. So I'm going to go ahead and get myself prepared. Gotta love the Goonies. Okay, comment below if you agree. If you comment on anything, I'm sure it will be that the Goonies rock. So here we are. I am in the lab coat. Fortunate to not have lost entirely my old professor patch. It's just at the cleaners at the moment. So here we are back in the presentation here that's been developed and continuing to be developed. If you have come on to see this thing before, if you've gone onto the website and you've downloaded this thing, then you already know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, I'm pretty sure you guys still see it backwards, but this is the entire presentation put together. So my first endorsement, of course, is going to be my own stuff, especially today on my broadcast. This one's me. We're doing a broadcast about the temperament of Sanguine, and I am very, very much sanguine. At one point, testing had me qualified as a sanguine compulsive. We've talked about compulsive behaviors yet, but basically that's when you don't have many other temperaments surrounding. But since then, I've developed some other things, but I'm going to stay on target as much as possible today. One of these sanguine traits is definitely to veer off into all these different directions, because this is kind of how a sanguine thinks that, you know, what's your favorite science? All of them. So it's kind of the branching out. So just to do some introductions, I do want to talk a little bit about the way to get to this presentation. So I'm going to start with that. Go to the kickershaver.com website, and there's a button right there where you can go into the main menu and download the app straight from my website. So I made that a button available on my website. You can also tap on, once you have that downloaded, tap on the presentation button in the main menu, and that will open this display for you to where you can explore this. And I've since learned that actually if you do this on a laptop like I'm doing, you really only need to press a button in one area to be able to get where you're going, as opposed to the double click that's necessary on the presentation app through the application itself. So let me zoom back out of here. As we continue forward, I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to do a little plug for a friend of mine, Douglas Blankenship. Douglas P. Blankenship has been a world businessman for quite some years, and he has taken it upon himself to sponsor and endorse the things that I do with the potential of funding and moving forward to help me do the things that come to mind that, you know, we both agree are pretty good ideas. You guys have seen some of the inventions, so we're looking for funding for those kinds of things. And he has been a world-renowned person for a long time in his circle, and his circle is global. So it's kind of neat. So my endorsement here is for the book, A Life of Purpose. And here's how I read it is he's talking a lot about his experiences through owning a nursing home, through different business ventures that he's been in, to where he kind of, in this book, I found he's pulling out the stories of individuals that he's experienced, whatever brief encounter they may have been through, that he's been able to pull out his own kind of thoughts for the moment. So I really take this as a kind of a journal of Mr. Douglas Blankenship, my good friend, who's again put some very serious thought into my projects and to me as a person, and endorses me, and I of course endorse him as well. So you can look up his other books as well. He's been author for a long time. So A Life of Purpose is available on the internet right now. What I kind of understand is there was an association with a criminal element by another Douglas Blankenship, and they are not associated. So it's kind of funny that the review on Amazon is countering that, but different guy. So we might want to take a peek at that. And if you do go through this like I am and kind of see it as you know, it's titled A Life of Purpose, Inspirational Stories of a Common Man. And I like that part about the common man, because really it's about, you know, not everybody has large sums of money to be able to fund whatever comes to their mind. And he was fortunate to be able to have the mindset, the business mindset, to be able to put himself into multiple different areas of enterprise. And he's pulling the humanity out of them. And that's what I've found in this book. So, some of the, titles in here: technological loneliness, happiness is. So, there's a lot of great information in here that you can pull out that you can apply to your own life and read it as something that you get some life out of. So, definitely endorse this idea of reading that book. Put that information in you at your leisure, and that is available at Amazon.com. Or actually, why don't we do this? If you're interested in a copy of the book, send me an instant message. Send Tristan an instant message, and we will set up the method of making sure that you get that book to you. So, and we can, of course, let him know that we are definitely endorsing what he's doing, so that we really want to see his inspiration reach more people as well, because he's an inspirational character. So as we continue forward, we're going to move into the Sanguine. So here we are with every science in front of us. If you've downloaded that application, then follow along. I'm going to drive us straight into it. Here I'm going to go right up here into psychology. I'm going to click into the bubble mentality, bring you back to what we're talking about here when it comes to the bubble. We call our personal space our bubble. So with that bubble, we can experience the world with our sensations, and we can put our sensations out into the world with our influence. So, psychologists. So, studiers of the psyche. The full demonstration here having the most popular psychologists that history has offered, even, William Wundt, which it's kind of interesting. There's not a lot of emphasis on Wilhelm Wundt. There's not a lot of emphasis, even though he was titled the father of psychology, and to separate it from philosophy and biology. So moving forward again, I still believe that Hippocrates kind of nailed it with what we're going to be studying in Hippocrates' temperament theory, 450 BC to 380 BC. So as we continue forward into the four temperaments bubble, today we are studying the Sanguine. As you know, episode 1 was the choleric, episode 2 the phlegmatic, episode 3 the melancholic, and here we are on one of mine, the Sanguine. I have sanguine and supine most dominant in my existence, with some traces of these that I've learned in their strengths, because I really like to adopt from all of these to become more complete in myself, so I can do more as an individual. So I challenge you to do the same, which is one of the reasons I did it this way, is so it can be very easy to access this information to get to what you're trying to access in your mind, to understand these things and apply them into your lives. So as we move forward, we're going to go into the Sanguine temperament. As you see, sanguine means blood. If you're of the Latin descent and you speak the language, then it roots to mean blood, sangre. So sanguine is in that, a lot of people like to say singing penguin, or I've heard it said, so that's one way to go. And as you know, we're going to start with this guy who's knocked down and got that weight of the world on his back. Weaknesses. We start in the weaknesses, so zoom out a little bit here. Oh. Here we go. Compulsive behaviors. Very given to act on the initial desire of whatever comes to mind and live in the moment. So that compulsive behavior would lead you to doing some indeterminate action that's going to cause a negative effect because of the compulsive behavior in the negative side, in the weakness side. Uncontrollable urges kind of link into here. And I'm going to do this for this session. I'm going to jump through and see which one of these kind of link together, and then we'll talk about them as a whole. Compulsive behaviors, sense of urgency, which can be used as a positive, but in this situation, of course, we're talking about the weaknesses. Uncontrollable urges. Let's see. Refusing to grow up, that fits into this one. Of course, there's a few typos in here I got to get to, but we won't focus on those right now. Naive, easily angered, circumstance controlled, that all fits in here together as well. So yeah, we've got compulsive attention seeker, dependent tendencies, lonely. So all of those kind of fitting into one spectrum when it comes to the sanguine. I'm pretty good at speaking about myself when it comes to these situations. And one of the things that I've found in my own self is that I've had compulsive behaviors in my past to where it led me to make poor decisions and compounded negative things in my life. So dealing with it's so funny that I've lost my train of thought on my own temperament today. So it's kind of silly, but I'm going to keep on. Here we go. There we go. Easily distracted. I distracted myself in my own mind because I can see my camera and it keeps making me push my hair out of my face. So it's kind of funny that I'm so scatterbrained, but again, we're on the sanguine temperament. So I'm going to go ahead and go at these one at a time. Move on to uncontrollable urges. If you're dealing with uncontrollable urges as a sanguine, it's extremely dangerous because when it means that whatever negative temptations that come to you in your life, if it's something that you enjoy, it's going to be that much harder for you to deny yourself. And that can be true of addiction. It can be true of unhealthy relationships. It can be true of negative emotions. So the danger of these uncontrollable urges linked with those compulsive behaviors is that you're going to set yourself up for failure when you it will cause you to seek out the things that are not good for you, in essence. So easily distracted, someone who kind of want to touch on this for a moment is the idea of attention deficit disorder. And I've heard some interesting things related to the subject. I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And here's my issue with that problem, that it's called a problem. Because I've learned so much about the individual temperaments, the individual people types, it's helped me understand more why I behave the way that I do. And when I look at my school life, I'm still an adult who, you guys know, I'm severely injured and have been for a long time. I'm dealing with the back pain right now and the shoulder pain. I'm just kind of muscling through it, but not to go off on a tangent. But when I look through my old school life, I look at the label of attention deficit disorder. And it's such, you got a double negative in there for one, and it's allowing for a deficiency. And I don't necessarily agree with the idea of that being accurate, because these people types are in existence, and it's understood that there are just natural strengths and weaknesses. It is a natural weakness for the sanguine type in any element, control, affection, or inclusion, to be one or more of these weaknesses. And of course, if you see right under here where it says easily distracted, it says chronic talker. What is the name of this show, folks? It's still talking. Even when I lose my train of thought, I'll normally still talk my way through it to get myself back on track. So, easily narcissistic. These are people who treat other people the lesser because they think themselves the greater. I like King Solomon, who said that even a wise man is thought a fool when he is silent. Let me rephrase that. Even a fool is thought a wise man when he is silent. Flip that around. So the narcissist believes himself to be wise. A true wise man will prove himself to be wise so that others believe it. But a true wise man doesn't truly have to say it. They prove it in their character, in their nature, in their belief system, in the way that they treat others. So true enlightenment comes with the giving of your life, not the taking of others. Really, let's say that the true enlightenment is the balance between knowing. I like to think the idea that true knowledge of justice through equity is understanding. But you guys decide. So anyway, that's super. Anyway, let's go on to dwells on the trivial. Now, mind you, this is something that I personally had to overcome, and you'll find this in the book under that me acting destructive chapter. I can't recall which chapter it is in my book, but it's in there related to dwelling on the trivial when it comes to being angry. And I've learned that it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to act mad, because when you act mad, it's like a crazy person, because that's what mad is associated with, is being crazy. So we definitely don't want to be associated with acting like a crazy person, because normally that's what causes somebody to come back and say, I'm so sorry for the way that I behaved. That's not me. And then we disqualify the person that we were altogether. And I was guilty of it as anybody back in the anger days, to where I just couldn't control my behavior. Or let me rephrase, I didn't know how to control my behavior. I've learned that if I had known what I know now, of course, hindsight's 2020, I would have been able to control my behavior because I would have understanding of emotion. And that's really the best way to control behavior, is by understanding your emotions. If you understand what your emotions are causing in yourself and how they can twist your mindset into dwelling on something that's trivial and causing yourself worry, shame, regret, fear, doubt, it's going to debilitate you from moving forward. So moving forward, which actually, as you see, there's a ton of these on the sanguine side. That's not just because I'm sanguine, it's just that there's so much to it. So moving on, we've got the forgetfulness. Good night. The forgetfulness that comes with the sanguine mentality really typically isn't necessarily a long-term thing. Normally the long-term memory is pretty great, and the ability to collect tons and tons and tons of information, but normally that's why there's forgetfulness when it comes to the sanguine temperament. The forgetfulness will be caused because there's so many thoughts that come between you and the last thought. So let's say you walk out of the room to go and get a butter knife in the kitchen, or let's say a screwdriver from the garage. And while you're out in the garage, you have 1,000 thoughts about either your day, or you have 1,000 thoughts about the things you need to do inside the house after you're done with your project, and you get to the garage and have no idea why you got there. So I'm sure that happens to everybody, but it's going to be a lot more common for that short-term memory in the sanguine. It's kind of funny because while they will dwell on the trivial doesn't necessarily get tons of information logged into the mind, because there's so much overload of sensory, and the sensory of a sanguine is hypersensitive to the surroundings because they want to absorb all of the environment around them and be in that that moment. So we'll jump over into the strength side and talk about that more. Over happy. Now that doesn't sound like a weakness. It doesn't sound like it's something you should be sad about, but over happy links into the right one under the one right up underneath it is scary with antics. That over happiness, that over joy, especially in a situation to where most people would be in a panic. When a sanguine finds themselves over happy, they can find themselves making the people around them nervous because it makes you look nuts. But there's also, that scary with antics, because that enjoyment of being the center of attention normally will cause someone to be, it's probably on here somewhere, obnoxious. It's not on here, but it's, scary with antic is kind of just another way of saying obnoxious and obnoxious behavior. I'm given to obnoxious behavior. Good example for a sanguine. I am most commonly associated in my life with being like Jim Carrey, especially when I do some of his bits. So you'll find me once in a while doing Fire Marshal Bill. You'll find me doing Ace Ventura. You'll find me doing Liar Liar and his character in there. So very much sanguine temperament related in that outgoing, scary with antics, but of course, he was able to make his living on it, and of course, I'm known to get some attention for mine as well. So I really salute what he's doing in the Enlightenment world, with some of the stuff that I've seen, and the way that he pours himself into a character is pretty cool too. So that's supposed to be restless. Restlessness is dangerous because for me it causes me insomnia severely, because my mind stays so active and it creates an inability or lack of really desire to be unconscious, because it may be common for a lot of sanguines, but for me personally, sleep is boring. There's nothing that can happen during the sleep hours. So normally I like the idea of either pondering or doing something or being either entertained or entertaining. So that restlessness can be a danger in the sanguine temperament. Embellishment to the point of lying, and this is where we get our storytellers. Embellishing to the point of lying is where you get your fish that gets longer and longer every year until you caught yourself that Moby Dick whale. So the embellishments can be something just for entertainment value, but it can also be extremely dangerous because it can cause you to lose credibility due to that embellishment. So definitely a dangerous thing to do. Refusing to grow up. They don't want to grow up. I don't know if Toys R Us still exists. I used to work for them back in the early 2000s, so a little name drop on the Toys R Us there. But refusal to grow up is definitely a danger, because it can cause you to want to be so much in a moment that you don't plan anything, and then you just live in that particular moment, and there's no surrounding world. Definitely dangerous to refuse to grow up. It also means one of my least favorite things about a dependency situation of adulthood is when it's to the point to where there's no contribution from the child. And that's really what a child is someone who relies on the nurturing of someone around them to make sure that they can survive. So I like the idea of childlikeness when it comes to being, well, we'll talk about that on the strength side too, but the refusal to grow up is dangerous in society, because anytime that you stop working, you are going to have to rely on either society or someone to care about you in order for you to continue surviving. And if you don't contribute to your environment, then you become a burden on not just society, but on the people around you. So it is, if you guys know me, then you know that I try to make sure that I'm the blessing wherever I go, regardless of my circumstances. And so that refusal to grow up is super dangerous to where, I mean, you guys see me, you know, I have all kinds of antics, but I try to use the ones that are going to bring people in love and unity and sharing something beautiful with, you know, my smiley faces, that there's one for heaven, one for the ones that are coming my way, and the one for when I'm going. So you'll see me with all kinds of antics that you'll find the Sanguine doing, and with all of these antics to make sure that attention is drawn. And for me, it's because I enjoy sharing something beautiful. So that refusal to grow up still has some innateness in me, but again, I like to flip things around and use them as a strength, which is what a good Sanguine will do. We'll talk about that over on the other side. All right, so it looks like some of the strengths made it over here into this. So appreciative of beauty definitely does not belong in the weakness side. So we'll talk about, obviously it's here, let's talk about it. Appreciative of beauty on the strength side of this is the ability to, again, see everything around them and be able to observe or to pinpoint a detail about, you know, I like to look at the molecule of the way, you know, photosynthesis works inside of a plant to get its sugars, and the vascular system inside of it that's a vein, and then you switch the E and the I and it becomes a vine. So, sorry, that's not how you do it, but you switch the words around, the letters around, and it's veins to vines. So I like to focus on those tiny molecular things, and then to look at the tree as a whole, then the planet as a whole, then the galaxies, and so on and so forth. So appreciative of beauty is definitely something that's going to be on the strength side, and the ability to embellish on its beauty to make it even more beautiful. I'm going to use one of my situations as an example of appreciative of beauty. I was fortunate enough to have had my first wife's mother contact her and ask me to go and visit her in the hospital. And it kind of seems like she knew her time had come. And of course she did pass away shortly thereafter. But you know, the sense of honor that I felt when she summoned me and asked for time with me, and in that time, that appreciative, the level of appreciation I have for beauty, I was able to embellish a story that led us into me taking her on a motorcycle ride, where she had always talked about wanting to go take a ride and get out of there and go and do whatever she could, but she'd been bedridden for years and years and years. So I picked her up and I put her, walked her out of the hospital, and I put her on the back of my motorcycle holding onto my back. And I told her, hold on. And we drove through, you know, where we were in the desert to get right up into the mountains in Crestline, to where those roads curve in and out. And, you know, I showed her all of the trees and how green and beautiful they were. And we felt the breeze just blowing against our face. And it was the nice, cool, perfect day for a trip. The sun was shining straight through the trees. And it was, you know, whenever we hit that sunlight spot, it was super warm. And then we'd get into the more darker canyon areas, the shaded areas from the trees, and it would get cool, and she'd feel it on her skin. And then the smile that was on her face, even though she was laying in the bed, as I told her this story, brought her to the place with me, to where all the beauties that I've seen as I drive through those experiences on my motorcycle, I got to share with a woman who was never going to be able to experience it again. And that appreciative of beauty part is in that side of the Sanguine that can take those experiences and embellish them to make it a storytelling. So again, that's going to be in the strength side, definitely not on the weakness side. Sensitive to others, I think that probably fits into that last story too. Imagine the life that you can live when you learn that you can't run out of give. Give is something you can always have, even if it's your last breath with a compliment. So the self-sacrificing idea is the idea that, ooh, looks like I'm frozen up here. Let's see if I can come back here. Bring me in full time. I can't tell. Are you there yet? Hello? Jazz hands. Press the bench. Are you there? Hey, there's people here. What's up, everybody? I'm glad you guys are on the show. Seeing all this stuff as we move forward. We've got a nice room full of people here, everybody. It's nice to see you. I can't really tell from here, and I can't lean on my shoulder because that hurts. But I'm going to keep going on this to make sure that it looked like it caught up again. So I'm going to keep going down to the self-sacrificing part where I just recently told somebody, I wrote this into the book. There's a story about me telling a guy it's okay if he kills me because he thinks I should die. You know, he says he wants me in chains, so I put my hands together and I offered him, I'm like, do it. Go ahead. You know, I said, but here's the thing. You're speaking hate and I'm speaking love, so love gives its life. You could have my life, but I did it because I'm your brother, not because I'm your enemy. So it was a self-sacrificing idea. I was pretty sure the guy probably wasn't really going to kill me, but you know, there was 7 of them. So anyway, you guys can read that in the book under the love chapter, right after we go through all the descriptions of what love is not in the Already Perfect book as I continue to write that. Stay tuned for that coming out. As we move forward, idealistic. The concept of having their own ideal and rooting themselves in it in such a way as to they won't move outside of their own mindset. That can be a negative, but of course in this situation, idealistic can be the positive, to where they set their own statutes and limitations and they move forward but their own zeal, which, remember the negative side, those compulsive behaviors can definitely conquer that idealism and cause them to go outside of their own statutes and limitations. That can be a danger. So this is, of course, on the strong sanguine side. Restless energy fits into restlessness. We kind of talked about that already, how that can be a negative, or in this situation is a negative. I'll have to move that stuff around later, so we'll just go ahead and move forward. Restless energy linked with the restlessness. We talked about that earlier. Egotistical kind of goes right in with that narcissistic behavior. The ego, Freud talks about the ego, but really we're going to talk about the definition specific of ego being the egotistical person who believes of themselves in a way as to become a braggart, to be someone who just brags about their own capabilities without really, having any reason for saying it. Even they're just bragging about themselves, to where people kind of check out when they do that, because they become that chronic talker who exaggerates their narcissistic points to the point of lying, embellishing the point of lying in their own egotistical manner. So extremely dangerous as a sanguine to become that egotistical person type who thinks themselves the better of others. And again, going back to that wisdom over smart, smart person is someone who kind of talks about their experiences, and a wise person will quote the experiences of others. So again, it's for the observer to decide who is wise, the person themselves. It is foolish to think yourself wise. It is wise to think yourself foolish. And that way you always stay the person who's willing to learn and observe to make the greatest decision. So moving right on forward, complainer. You guys have heard me quote before the book. This is an old book, not older than Hippocrates, but Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Chapter 1, never criticize, complain, right there, complainer, or condemn. So I highly recommend that you get that book in you. You can purchase it online, or of course you can go through YouTube, and the book is available there on audio. That's how I've read it there. Of course, I've had the book in my hands as well too. I like old bookstores too. So if you like old bookstores, definitely find yourself a good copy of that. And it is a very good book to have. Loud and Obnoxious. I told you guys Obnoxious was on here. I just couldn't find it earlier. Loud and Obnoxious fits in right in there with Chronic Talker and Scary with Antics. The obnoxious behaviors, we kind of talked about that already, so they'll lump that in. Ranting. I actually remember at some point on either Facebook, or I'm going to date myself here and say MySpace. That's right, MySpace, ladies and gentlemen. I had a page for ranting, and I said, whatever you want to rant about, this is what I'm going to rant about. And I would rant about whatever, political stance I took at that point, or whatever somebody had done to me, and I felt, justified in complaining about it. I had an entire page dedicated to it, so I don't remember where that was, but even I'm sure there's some old rants of mine on Facebook where once in a while I have to stop myself. You'll see me erase it, but I might complain about something, and it's like, I really don't like. I have friends that I complain to, and my environment, my social environment is really for embracing life and sharing good things. And then that close personal group gets to hear the complaints so they can help nourish my mentality back to something positive. So, which is, again, that's of course what I do with the Already Perfect Foundation to help my clients find a better sense of self-worth to move forward in their lifestyle and then their relationships in that order. So, of course, I like the whole physician heal thyself. So as I have done for myself in being able to maintain a specific level of joy, and have crazy situations happen in my circumference. So moving forward, and again, endorsing that book, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, oblivious to emotions, and of course not oblivious to their own emotions. This would be oblivious to the emotions of others while they are phenomenal spectators. The idea of being able to float off into your own mind and do even something like this that we're on right here, to be able to have so many different branches of knowledge and having them all coming in for their opinion at the same time, it can cause them to be oblivious to their surroundings. And of course, the chronic talking can cause them to want to make a point instead of hear a point. And that's a major danger really with every temperament, but this one specifically, since we're talking about sanguine, but I'm going to talk about just humanity in general. If you find yourself talking in the room, it means that you believe that you know what should be said. And then, of course, if you don't listen, then you'll never know what people think. You'll never know the emotions of others and be able to relate, and it causes you to have those narcissistic and egotistical behaviors. Those all kind of course, linking together, like we were talking about earlier. So oblivious to the emotions of others, definitely a danger if you're, especially someone who, sanguines normally typically care about others, but their attention span is so short that they want to care about 1,000 people instead of focusing on one at a time. So, of course, that's been a danger for me, but of course I have you guys as my outlet. So thank you guys again for being here. Delicious water. So this naivete, if you will, to be naive is a danger because you can get duped easily. I had a friend, I remember walking down the street as a young working teenager and recently gotten paid, and we had left a fast food restaurant to walk back home, and we had passed a gentleman who was carrying around a broken serpentine belt for their vehicle, and he was asking for money. So I gave him a bunch of money, and really you won't find me bragging much about, it's not really bragging that I gave away money, just the idea that fits into the storyline, because my friend told me, he's like, it's not going to be very common that somebody's going to carry around a broken serpentine belt asking for money. You probably got duped. And of course, my response was, it's money well spent either way. And then in hindsight, I had to realize that it's not necessarily good to encourage the type of behavior that's going to cause someone to scam you instead of earn an honest way or find an honest way to gain the necessary resources. So, moving out of the naive into circumstance controlled, we kind of talked about that already a little bit. Probably can't see this under here even. Oh, here we go. Let me get out of there. Easily angered. That one is super dangerous. We kind of talked about this already with the compulsive behaviors and the uncontrollable urges. With that MAD concept that I talked about in my book, Already Perfect, the easily angered can make it dangerous for you if you... I like the idea that every time you show your anger to the world, it proves that whatever you're going through, you don't have the maturity to deal with. And if you had the maturity to deal with it, let me rephrase that, whenever you're mad, whenever you show anger or your severe frustrations, your frustrations prove what you can and can't handle. And as you move forward in your own life, if you show frustration all the time, it just proves that whatever circumstances you're going through, you don't have the patience to work your way through that situation. So you just find yourself angry. And one of the things that I've learned is that anger is not worth your time. It's kind of a useless emotion, a lot like worry. And mind you, there's tons of things that I should be angry about, and I have every right to be angry about. But, one of the lines in my book you'll hear me quote all the time, obviously, is that true maturity is your ability to control the display of your emotions. So as you find yourself easily angered, if you're in this sanguine temperament, then controlling that anger shows your levels of growth in ability to work on the strength side of things. So considered all talk, and of course that's an extreme danger because a sanguine normally typically likes to know a lot about a lot of different subjects and finds themselves easily bored. So I've actually been in a lot of experiences, especially because I've been accused of looking extremely young for being 42 and having my youngest child just graduating high school. So when I tell people about all the different experiences I've had with work and all the different fields of enterprise I've worked in, from agriculture, construction, law, and I guess it's kind of law enforcement.
It is law enforcement.
It was kind of law enforcement, definitely legal field, working hand in hand with the sheriff's department, working with the justice system through the courts, and the expanse, the ranching, the cotton gin, the pickle factory. I've just done so many different jobs that it's easy for someone like me to be considered all talk because we have a lot to talk about, being that chronic talker fits in. And if you've got someone who's exaggerating and embellishing to the point of lying, then they don't even really need the real stories to back them up. They can embellish any story and make it like it's interesting. But of course, on the flip side, we'll talk about this later on how that makes the natural storytellers and the people who can keep you entertained. But again, we're back on the weaknesses. So prefers to talk than to listen. And that goes kind of back into some of this other things we were talking about when it comes to the talker in the room who's only interested in displaying their information than receiving it. So that prefer to talk over listening means that you believe you know more than everybody else in the room. So that's a danger if you don't find the right places to display the information that you have to display. So, of course, one of the greatest things about being considered all talk. If you're not all talk and you really talk about your genuine experiences, you will find yourself in a much more comfortable position when people find out that you are not all talk. So it's pretty great to have all these crazy experiences tattooed into my life that I've done that prove I'm not all talk. So I think I even did an episode.
You did.
About that. So you guys can actually backdate that. Maybe we'll attach that to this as on a watch party later on. And if you're on the watch parties, hey, welcome here. I'm glad you guys made it. Awesome that you guys make it on here too. Super cool. Leave your questions and comments below. For those of you who are live with me, you know I love you so much. I'm so glad you guys come and hang out with me. It makes me feel amazing. And then I see stuff on the screen that people are writing, and eventually I'm going to go up and read what it says so I can figure out how to respond to what you're saying. But until then, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving forward on this episode. So if you do have a question about this particular stuff, make sure you reference what I'm talking about so I know what your question is related to. And moving forward, we've got forgetful of obligations. And of course, that links to that short-term memory thing I talked about. And it's kind of like the person who says, you know what, I'm going to go to your party and I'm going to hang out and I'm going to do everything with you. And then you commit yourself to doing that 5 different places. And then of course you either stay home, you go to sleep, you forget about them altogether, and you do something else and you forget entirely. And it's a dangerous thing to do because it's an easy way to lose friends and make people think you really don't care about what they're doing. And that's another danger for the phlegmatic. But on a different side of it, the phlegmatic doesn't go because they don't want to put their energy towards things necessarily. And then, of course, the sanguine will maybe even kick themselves later because they commit to too many things, and then they find themselves on the flip side of strength to where you can't, no matter how strong you are, you can't fulfill all those commitments that you made. So it's extremely dangerous to forget the obligations that you make because it means that you're a liar and you can't be trusted. And that's danger, 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 because you want people to believe you when you talk. You want to, if you're a chronic talker, then do something good with the things that you're saying. So this is one of the things that I do because I'm a chronic talker. Until a few minutes ago, I was the only one in the room. So other than, of course, my lovely guest here on this broadcast, and then the lovely Tristan, of course, joined me shortly thereafter. So moving forward, we've got doesn't complete tasks or keep appointments. Those kind of tie in together on forgetful of obligations. And that kind of ties into an inconsistency when it comes to calling yourself fashionably late. As a workman and someone who always believed in showing up at work early, I'm thankful that it was developed in me as a cowboy mentality of honor code that made me always punctual. And the flip side of that means that you're irresponsible, you can't be trusted because your word means nothing and you're wasting other people's time. So I find it extremely inconsiderate when people are late, unless, of course, there's a good reason for it. But really, there's a big difference, again, between reason and excuse. So sanguines will use a lot of excuses and tell a great story on why they were late. But at the end of the day, when you're late for someone else and you make them wait for you, I was told this very young that it means that you don't care about their time. And as someone who I try to be extremely careful of other people's emotions and extremely cautious of other people's emotions and not oblivious, then it's something that I try to use as a strength for myself to keep my appointments. And of course, I like the biblical term that says, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. And that way people aren't confused when you talk. You speak what you mean and you mean what you speak. So those all tying in together, highly recommended behavior for every temperament and every human being to keep us all honest. So moving forward, low self-esteem. Now, that one's a harsh one because not only does it fit every temperament, for the sanguine specific, the polarities become very severe because, again, if you remember, it represents blood. And blood goes everywhere. But not only that, there's two forms of it. There's your oxygen blood, and then there's your non-oxygen blood. There's your veins and there's your arteries, and each having their specific flow throughout the body through their own vascular vein system, veins and vines. Remember, we talked about that earlier. So the low self-esteem concept inside of a sanguine is the flip side of the life-giving antics, the manic side that flips them into that deep, deep depressive side. And that's where, for me personally, I've got songs that are about hope and love and joy, and I've got songs that are about devastation and suicide and even, suicide prevention, and the dark side. So you'll find both extremes, and it's kind of funny in the sanguine. Typically, you'll find they'll rip the air conditioner straight on over to the cold side or straight on over to the hot side, and there's no such thing as adjustable. It's one way or the other. Windows all down or windows all up. Never just a few of them down to the right. You'll find the extremes on both sides. So in this situation, that would be a danger on that low self-esteem side that keeps you believing that you don't have worth. And I'm somebody who still goes through those mindsets to where I even, I kind of asked Tristan the other day, what do I do? So, and of course, helping me redefine, okay, there are people who experience great benefit experience benefit from as a result of knowing the things that I'm able to teach. And of course, I was able to prove that again a couple of days ago. Had a small audience in a social gathering that was totally impromptu, and it's so fulfilling to be able to go and give this life to people who just need a little bite of understanding that links them to a more complete sense of self. And being able to do that and having that mind mapping capability is such a worthy thing to have as someone who genuinely cares about others. So it's kind of beautiful to be able to share that. But again, we're on the weakness side. No more low self-esteem when you're operating in your strength, or at least the ability to manage the low self-esteem in such a way as to keep yourself from harm. Can you pretty please get me a charger going? Because this one's gonna die. Yes. And I'm only halfway through the weaknesses.
Yes,
good night.
notice that.
Yes. So I'm gonna try to. I'm just gonna keep going and moving forward. So if you see this camera move around, I'll move around plenty anyway.
Is the extension cord with the buffer?
It is.
Is it downstairs?
Yes,
all
it is.
Right.
It's
give me 1 second.
Thank you. All right. So. Slow performance is related to interest fading fast. So you'll find a sanguine typically trying to find the fastest way to get things done so they can be done with them and move on to something that's not monotonous and more interesting. So the slow performance is really related to an interest level when they find themselves in a mundane situation where they're not really able to perform much, to do anything impressive or to draw attention, then you'll find a very slow performance through that interest level because it's just droning on and on and on. So typically, the other side of that is going to be a very fast performance with broad spectrum of thinking to find the quickest solution in the typical sanguine and the strength. But again, this is in the weaknesses. So the polar opposite being the slow performance, confidence and interest fade fast. That kind of links into that low self-esteem part. That when the confidence is lost, they drop into that low self-esteem state of mind. And one of the dangers of a sanguine is thriving on appreciation. And one of the dangers of thriving on appreciation is having your confidence level in other people's hands. I believe that all people should take other people's opinions into consideration and then make a decision for themselves based on your own intellect. And so that way you're living your life and nobody's living your life, or you're not living vicariously through somebody else. So when that confidence fades fast, it's normally because they will soar really high on that wave that says I'm capable of doing anything, and then some circumstance can knock down that mindset that makes you think you can do anything, because a failure hits, and failure proves that you couldn't do whatever that project was, or whatever it was that knocked you off of your off kilter, and that confidence level wobbles, and it can drop all the way down into that darkness and hanging out in the mindset with that black bile. So let's see. Unable to discipline, of course, for me personally, this is one of the reasons I did not join the military. I really don't respond well to orders. I respond much better to suggestions, and then I'm able to make a logical decision based on that. So we're going to make some adjustments here. Oh, like this and like that. Let me have that.
Yep.
Please and pretty please.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Will it work, though?
I don't know. Unless you'll make another charger. There.
Are we back? Nacho, are you back? And ooh, we're back.
Is it charging now? Yeah.
We're back, and we're backwards. So if we drop off on this, there may be an episode 4B. Because Sanguine has a lot to go on. There's a lot to this temperament because they do so very, very much. And I should say we, because again, I am broadly in this spectrum, and I've dealt with a lot of these negatives in my life to, of course, once I learned what they were, remember what I said, the strength is the seed and the weakness is the weed. So I've been seeing these things in my life and plucking out those nasty weeds in my garden and putting them, to burn so they're not dirtying up my soil. And then you'll see more fruit, and more fruit provides better things for other people to eat too. So by your fruits you will know them. So by their fruits you will know them, that is. Sorry. Misquote. Unable to discipline. So yeah, we talked about that. I was kind of leading into the idea of my reluctance when it came to joining the military was the idea that someone's going to be ordering, and that's necessary when it comes to the art of war. General Sun Tzu explains how, you've got to have your line of command set up to where your tens are commanded, your hundreds are commanded, your thousands are commanded, and so on and so forth. So, I understand the concept. It really doesn't fit me because, again, I really like that Mel Gibson film, Hacksaw Ridge, related to the guy who's a conscientious objector. I don't have the heart to take another person's life. I have the heart to give mine, so it's probably not the best environment for war. But you will find me as a endorser of the mentality that there's soldiers who give their lives, and you will find me to be, well, if you guys even check right here on the photos of my Facebook, you'll find the congressional recognition for my support of this, the veterans and military. So got a broad variety of those. Even last year was awarded a medal, so awesome. Shout out to my friend Ismet Evans. She currently runs the Inland Empire Veterans Stand Down organization. So much love out to you. Miss you a whole bunch. We got to come and see you again. So as we move forward, out of order and poor planning skills, those kind of fit into another area that's a diagnosis that's given called EFD. Kind of fits in with ADD. EFD leads into kind of more of the adult side, but it's more of a sanguine trait. Executive function disorder is a disorder that is thought to have been depleted as a result of trauma that causes the mind to shut off organizing capabilities and strategic skills. In the research that I've done, that's one of the things that was said as a hypothesis or theorem on why that exists. But as someone who is extremely sanguine, it's a natural weakness to not be able to plan things, to not understand how to plan things, even because the mindset is out of order. And again, out of order to where you'll find one conversation leading into 15 different tangents. Instead of telling one story, you'll find yourself way down a rabbit hole instead of focused on whatever it was that was initially talked about, which also helps them to be the chronic talker. So poor planning skills fitting into that almost a hard capacity, not inability, but difficulty in strategy and planning and making things fit in order to be able to fulfill a plan. So they will depend on a choleric or a melancholic to make a plan, and then the plan will be set to where everything's done in order and they get to enjoy the experience. So that is a negative when it comes to that inability or that difficulty in doing such. Time waster. I've found that the time waster will be dangerous when it comes to getting work done, and you can appear to work slowly just because your mind is on something else. You find yourself pondering, you find yourself lingering, and even, you might find yourself standing somewhere and had no idea you were doing it just because you stood there and got stuck on a thought and your body stopped moving. So, time waster in the sense of the personal embellishments of stories, because enjoying the stories in your own mind, again, that's where you'll find the daydreamers and ponderers. I do not have any issue with pondering. You just got to do it at the right time. So emotionally driven, I like that as a weakness, because you will find me stating in my enrichment science that emotions are the biggest liars in our lives. And that's not saying that all emotions are inaccurate. It's saying that certain ways that our emotions cause our mind to believe certain things. You can cause yourself to believe that your neighbor is angry with you because you believe they gave you a look, or you believe this or that about them, and your neighbor has no idea that you believe this of them, nor are they actually mad at you. So that being just one example of someone who's emotionally driven, you would likely be easily angered and then cause a break in that relationship just because something you believe that wasn't true. I got a great example of someone who they brought a dish to a Thanksgiving dinner as a trait that offers, good tidings to a dinner and saying, hey, here's something that I make. I hope we can enjoy all this together. And instead, the hostess of the home became extremely angry and offended over the gift. So that emotionally driven mentality caused a rift in relationship and eliminated the potential, because that easily angered mindset just eliminated the relationship altogether. So extremely dangerous to be an emotionally driven individual. Another great example of an emotionally driven person would be the terrible two. You've seen this person in the market. They've asked for the candy and they've been told no. What is their reaction? They act like a bloomin' lunatic. So they throw their fits, their tantrums, they scream to the top of their lungs, and they just display these emotions, and entirely emotions. There's no logic behind it. And if the parent is worth their salt, of course, the child will not receive a reward for that behavior and get the candy. So, of course, that's my opinion as a parent. You're welcome to your own. But that emotionally driven mentality in adult is definitely going to look much different when you're the 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old who's standing at the candy line throwing a temper tantrum because, you're not allowed to have the candy. It's going to look a lot more silly. So that's it's a danger if you're in that sanguine. Dependent tendencies and lonely, compulsive attention seeker, craves popularity and approval. Man, I think all those fit together really, really well when it comes to instead of interdependent is entirely different. Dependent is like the mentality that a relationship is 50-50. And it's a common misconception where a relationship is two people, and both of those two people should be complete. Before they engage in the relationship, they shouldn't necessarily have to complete one another outside of their individuality. They should know who they are when they get into the relationship. And that way, the completion of one another is the magnetic attraction that gets to remain and avoid those dependent tendencies that cause repulsion. Because like the Elmira character, if you guys can remember Looney Tunes, back in the day, this Elmira girl, Tiny Toons, I even believe it was, she would hug them and squeeze them and hold them and squeeze them so tight that they would gasp for their life. And that's a danger if you have these different tendencies. It's also extremely dangerous in other temperaments. But in this one, it's more based on that constant need for approval and attention. So that compulsive desire to have attention on them, especially especially in the different layers. If you're sanguine in your affection, then you're always going to need the other person to give you approval, and it just draws on them as a constant source. And if they don't have that, then you'd be depleting something, and that would cause a rift in the relationship. So definitely dependent tendencies, are dangerous. And there's a huge difference between alone and lonely. You can be alone and enjoy your alone time without being lonely. And especially one of my biggest recommendations when it comes to relationships and engaging in a relationship is go and enjoy your life and find something that you enjoy doing. Find your hobby, find your lifestyle. If you go to the mountains, and go to the mountains and keep doing that. And if you go to kayaking, if you go to the lake, if you go to the movies, if you go to skiing, wherever you go, whatever you do, go and do it. And develop your lifestyle doing the things that you enjoy doing. And then once you enjoy that completion of your own lifestyle, then you can start looking around and see if there's anybody there who's doing the things that you enjoy. And that's the best place to meet somebody who's doing the things that you can consistently enjoy doing. So that loneliness is really dangerous in anybody to feel lonely. You develop the proper relationship with yourself and your strengths, and you will find yourself much more comfortable company and find yourself even chuckling on the old stories that come up into your mind when you're sitting alone and pondering these things that a sanguine will typically ponder. But of course, again, this transfers into all those temperaments. Compulsive attention seeking, that's on the negative side, of course. That's going to go back over here to that scary with antics, with the compulsive behaviors, that first thing we talked about. And that's dangerous when it comes to the society that's around you. They're going to think you're a lunatic if you constantly crave attention and then you force other people to give you their energy. So that's a definite danger, that craving approval and popularity. Of course, the craving for it is negative. The access to it is positive, because if you have the ability to gain popularity and approval through the good things that you have to offer, then of course that's going to be a strength. But the craving there is really the negative, to where you don't need that to be your food, to where it's not something you're going to have replenished constantly. It's something you can do within your own mentality. So finds ways to get credit. This is one of the dangers would be kind of like if I was a kind of a manipulating sanguine, then earlier when I told the story about the gentleman who I gave my money to, of course I'm telling the story because I got duped. But let's say that I was the kind of person who's like, oh, I want them to know that I give money to people, and that, you know, that I can be duped, and that actually, sorry, that would be a negative, but let's say I'm trying to flip this around to where it looks like I'm this great person because I've given money to somebody who I thought was in need. That would be a negative, and one of the ways that a sanguine can use dangers as a way of manipulating people into seeing the things that they do. Another way would be, it's like, you know, hey, those dishes that were in your sink, you don't have to worry about those. I took care of it for you. So you don't want to be that person who's just demanding the credit for the things that you do. It's much more rewarding when people observe things that you do and then they volunteer the information. And if you're that type of person who does it, then you won't have to do the lip service. It'll be your lifestyle anyway, and you'll get your own reward because altruism is its own reward. So, dominates conversations. Good Lord, am I guilty? I will take over a room if you give me the opportunity to. And it's not uncommon for me to try to keep it as long as possible. So here we are in the room together as we continue to move forward. Going on to the dominating of conversations, that fits into the other stuff we were talking about already with chronic talker, exaggerating, embellishing to the point of lying. So dominating a conversation fits also in with prefers talking over listening. Speaks with listening. That's going to fit in there too. So replaces others' opinions by speaking for them. I'm going to separate that one for a second. Go back up to dominates conversations, prefers talking over listening, and speaks with listening. Speaks with listening is when someone offers information, a conversation that you have to say, and you introduce, let's say I'm speaking on this and someone interjects with something interesting that they have to say, and I say, yeah, and then I move right on into the thing that I was talking about. It's really kind of placating even to where you're not paying any attention to what the other person is saying. There's another version of this that's actually speaking listening for the sake of speaking, which is a danger because a sanguine has so many different tangents happening in their own mind. When someone else is speaking and you want to interject, you can take over the entire conversation and dominate them. And your goal in listening to what they have to say would be to have some opinion about it instead of really. Sometimes this can be a masculine feminine thing too. And there's books about this when it comes to someone wanting to just be able to vent, to just be able to speak and then be heard, and that's it. The danger of a sanguine would be if they're listening only for the sake of responding, then the other person isn't going to be heard at all because they're going to still have all the information in their own mind still stored up waiting to be said, while the sanguine is dominating the conversation, giving their own opinion about whatever length of the story the person was able to spit out before the sanguine dominated the conversation again. So extremely dangerous in that area. Back to replaces others' opinions with speaking, and of course that's the art of suggestion fits into this when it's a very common trait for speakers to ask a question and answer it themselves. What do I mean? What I mean is what I just did right there when I asked a question and answered it myself. So the replacing of other people's opinions by speaking for them is something that's dangerous because it means, again, that other person isn't going to be able to offer their opinion. You're just going to set your belief system over what you believe their opinion to be. So a strong sanguine will speak their belief of the other person's opinion and allow the other person to agree or not after they've let this other person release all the information. So another strong, very strong danger to go into that dominating of conversations and to replace other people's opinions by speaking for them. And of course, even if you don't speak for them, if you develop your own opinion of someone else's opinion without hearing them out, it's dangerous for you as well because it closes your mind. And of course, sanguines normally like to be pretty open-minded because they think about everything all the time. Let's see, moving on, disloyal. That fits into this constantly on a whim as well. Constantly on a whim, disloyal, volatile, fits into the easily angered, fits into the forgetfulness, fits into the forgetful of obligations. So the disloyalty fits into there for very specific reasons. One of them because they are constantly on a whim, so their commitments become disposable. And that's dangerous because that means they can always be looking for the most fun thing to do. And if they find the most fun thing to do, they don't want to deny themselves that experience because of that compulsive behavior. It will place them in a position to go after the thing that they desire for that moment instead of fulfilling obligations, instead of doing that monotonous work that they find themselves doing that slow performance with. So extremely dangerous on that disloyalty side. You have to decide to be loyal. You have to decide that people are worth your time and the commitments that you make to them, and that their hearts get set on you being somewhere. So you should fulfill the commitments that you set in other people's hearts. Otherwise, you become that empty puzzle piece of absence and cause loneliness. Oh, horrible to be the cause of loneliness when it's genuine for a good reason. When anybody stands you up, it's just a horrible feeling inside, especially if they're no call, no show. It just shows that they just blatantly don't care. And that is dangerous for the sanguine when it comes to forgetfulness, because it doesn't mean that you didn't care when it comes to forgetfulness. It means that you forgot. So write down lists, be responsible with your obligations. Of course, we've all got calendars and stuff these days that give alerts. So volatile really fits in with that easily angered. Lives by excuses. Remember I talked about earlier when it came to the showing up late, that living by excuses is completely different than living by reason. You know, if you have a reason for something, then, you know, a car rolled over in front of you and was directly in your path. You were late, I understand, but you left late because your alarm didn't go off. You got all these excuses, this and that. There's plenty of excuses that go out that just have no business being there. The reality is, if you place the value on the time, you will find yourself in the presence of punctuality. You will find yourself right where you need to be on time. So living by excuses, of course, ties into a bunch of those other we just talked about. Repeats stories of grandeur. This is where you'll find someone who they have all of these tales to where, whether they're embellished with lying or not, they will be tales of success. There will be accolades. There will be any compliment they were paid. You will find them repeating any stories where they get to be the hero in the story. They get to be the center of attention. They get to put on the cape. This would be the weak sanguine who does these things as a means of gaining attention because of the craving for the popularity and approval. So let's go out of here. We're following along on the Prezi application, and you can see it forward there. My old man is showing today. My back is hurting pretty good. And I dropped you. No. Let's see if we can do this again. All right. Balancing this on the charger cable, so bear with me here. And I think we are back in business. Yes, we are. Okay, so back in business, back into the sanguine bubble. And we're going to this guy lifting up all those weaknesses and catering to his strengths by putting those on top of himself. Here we are as the strength side. So here we are. We're going to plant some seeds in the sanguine that lift you up in your strengths to tell you all those good things about yourself. So if you are the sanguine of temperament, pay attention. If you are not of the sanguine temperament, pay attention because the people that you know, this will help you understand them better. And that goes for all of these. Make sure you backdate all these. Go watch every episode so you can understand yourself and the people around you and adopt those strengths for yourself. Let's jump straight in since we're living on borrowed time here. And this is already, I don't even know how long this has been, but let's go ahead and move forward into the strength side. Side B of the tape, if we're talking old school. So, desirable storyteller. That embellishing to the point of lying. Those embellishments make for great stories. It's one of the ways I attribute myself as a better writer, to be able to embellish on the ideas that come to my mind. You know, at the end of the day, most of the movies that you've ever watched that aren't based on true story are somebody's embellishments on their imagination. So you will find those very creative storytellers in the room. And that desirable, I kind of skipped over desirable. And let's see if there's that desirable mentality is that when you find yourself a strong sanguine, when you leave someplace, people will be excited to see you come back. They desire to have your presence. And when you're in their presence, you leave something behind that kind of makes them want more when you come back around. And again, this is a strong sanguine. The negative sanguine is that chronic talker that people don't mind seeing leave because they're all talk. The strong sanguine is a desirable character because they're true with what they say, and their storytelling is really for storytelling, like my storytelling. You won't find me as a liar, but you will find me as a writer who has all kinds of stories to tell. You'll find my stories, Alter Ego, Stupid Cupid, The Pill. There's tons of books and movie concepts that I'm writing based on that natural storytelling capability. And it just kind of jumps into my head from wherever thoughts originate, and there becomes something that I get to bring to life when I focus on the details. So life to environments, and that one's a really a wonderful thing to be when you find yourself alive to the environment. And I find this a potential for every client and every person that I come into contact with, that you can be this. So while it's normally a natural strength for a sanguine, I would ask that every person kind of adopt the life to environment idea in your positive nature, that you have something that you can give. Again, backdating that conversation that says that you can give your last breath, and that can be something that's life-giving, even if it's your last. So that life to environments is something I encourage in others, but it's kind of natural to be the animated life to the party, the person who's got the room paying attention to them. They're talking about the head of the flower, or they're talking about the thorn, but either way, they're engaging everyone in conversation. So I believe that's on here too somewhere. Encourager. One of my favorite parts about my position is being able to see what's worth encouraging. And when people call me with inner conflict and things that they're dealing with, my encouragements are able to put them into a better mindset and perspective that causes them to see things my way, that sees the encouragements in life instead of the discouragements. One of the things that you'll find me saying in the books, it says that every time you say you can't, you're right. And you're only right until you prove yourself wrong. And when you prove yourself wrong, you'll realize that you can. So one of my favorite examples is when I would throw a wiffle ball to my daughters in the pool, or a tennis ball, and they were, in softball. So I'd have them dive just outside of their reach, and before they knew it, they were catching the ones that were just outside of their reach, realizing that yes, you can reach that much further out, and it just comes with confidence and effort. So that encourager mentality is where you'll find people who are able to lift other people up and bring that life to environments. The strong sense of humor. I really miss the t-shirt I used to have, but I enjoy giving it to my friend, my boy Darth. Shout out to Darth. I love you. So it's got the Joker on it, and it says, it's all a joke. And you'll find that the sanguine is someone who can crack a joke at a funeral and try to lift people's spirits, or just on the flip side, that could be a negative, and it could be an inappropriate timing because of the compulsive behavior. But there's someone who's going to try to bring life into any negative environment, and you'll find that strong sense of humor. You'll find a lot of comedians, a lot of evangelists, a lot of life coaches, a lot of motivational speakers. They're going to be in this sanguine temperament, people who get up on a stage, musicians and such, which you find a lot of temperaments in musicians, but typically the person up in the front is going to have that real strong sanguine temperament. So moving right along, enthusiastic, and like I just mentioned, holding the listener and the audience, that ability to captivate people with the embellishments and the stories and the desirable sense of humor and the way that they present themselves, all going to hold people together. That hyper curiosity, again, I mentioned earlier the attention deficit disorder. Well, what a horrible name for something, but to call someone deficit and say they have a disorder, it just doesn't make sense, because they just fit right into that hyper curious mentality that says, once I've either learned something and observed it, it's something that's stored in my mind, I've learned it, I want to move on and maybe revisit it another time. But, let's keep moving with that curiosity. And I like that this is listed in the strengths, because that hyper curiosity is something that there's a very large percentage of highly successful people in the world who are sanguine in their temperament because of that fortitude to just go, and stay motivated and stay with that strong sense of humor and see things as funny as they are. And that hyper curiosity will keep them satisfied in so many different areas. And for me personally, I'll talk about how, I'm an inventor, and I don't just have one invention in one field. I've got inventions in multiple different areas. I'm a philosopher, and I've got multiple philosophies I've written. My first book of philosophy I wrote when I was 18 years old. Tristan just read some of it the other day. It's kind of interesting because I haven't read it since then, and she says that it's the same stuff that I talk about today. So it's pretty great that that's out there. My hyper curiosity made me a better writer as a singer and songwriter, and improved the quality of my music when I was able to express my hyper curiosity in learning how to play the guitar at 31 years old. You'll find me as a presenter doing things like this, and I'm not receiving a paycheck for this. I just really enjoy learning all this stuff and being able to share it. And then, of course, eventually down the road, hopefully somebody likes what we're doing. And you'll find me in other environments doing this on much different stages. So that hyper curiosity, being in the sanguine temperament, very strong. Of course, it can be that negative if you can't focus, if you refuse to focus and put yourself in a position of having your hyper curiosity benefit you. One of my best examples is my friend Melissa, who I had shown her some sketches I had done of the Gig on the Go invention that you guys, there's a really old broadcast of the Gig on the Go when I first built it, way back when she and I became friends. And the night before I built it, I was showing her the prototype, or the drawings, the designs, and she asked me why I hadn't built it, and quoted to me my own words. She said, you said you've done all these jobs, you've done construction, you've done all this different types of work. Why don't you just do it? And, my response to her is, what do you think you are, Nike? So, she responded to me, just do it. She said it again. It's like, what? I went home and I built it that night, and I've been building my own prototype ever since. So that hyper curiosity for me personally has benefited me greatly as an individual, because even if my body passes on and I go into the next existence, then I still have that resonance of stuff that I've crafted with my hands. And I challenge you to do all those things that come to your mind. Stop procrastinating on it, because I know you have 5 minutes that you could spend a day or a week. Set an alarm, 5 minutes to just write it down, and then start building it. Start building the things you're hyper curious about. And that's for everybody, not just for the same. So demonstrative, most of the jobs that I've had and what I'm doing now is demonstrating. So you'll find most of the sanguines very demonstrative or demonstrative, however you want to pronounce that word. So that ability to be expressive, cheerful, bubbly, stage ready, kind of all those fit in together into that really life to environments. Those all kind of link in. Here's one of my favorite things. The wide-eyed idea, of course, you'll see how I start my show, right? Right up in your face with big old bright eyes and ready to go. So this is one of my favorite ones, even though it's one of the worst ones for a sanguine, and it's got no business being on the strength side. This is a weakness, seemingly innocent. And it's a sense of seeming innocence that can be used for a negative. Now, mind you, there's that when it comes to the childlikeness or refusal to grow up. Remember, I mentioned that kind of healthy balance, kind of like, I like to think the antics that I use are not too scary for the world. Like, kind of go out and do the things that I do, and look however it is that I'm going to look. So. The seemingly innocent side I'm talking about really is on the manipulative side for the weakness side. But since it's on the strength side, let's talk about how it can be a strength. You get characters like Stuart from Mad TV. You get Dot from Mad TV. You get, again, we talked about the comedians. These, we get Howie Mandel doing Bobby's World. So that kind of... You want me to do Bobby's Rule?
And then when you're talking about the seeming innocence, and there's no other way.
I love that place. Thank you.
So, Bobby's World. Bobby's World. I love you, Howie Mandel. I do. I used to be as OCD until I learned this stuff. But, moving right on, I used to watch Monk.
Oh, God.
For advice. Like, that guy's got it figured out. I don't want to touch that stuff either. But I did say I was moving on, so I'm going to do it. So, lives in the moment. We kind of talked a lot about that in the last side of it when it comes to the negative side. But the good side about living in the moment is being able to stay cheerful and joyful and bubbly. In most negative or positive circumstances, you get to be the person where everybody's like, why are you so happy? And then you get to tell them, and then maybe they get to be happy with you, or they get to stay grumpy, whatever it is, but you get to stay living in the moment, which keeps you pretty perpetually joyful. That adaptability fits in there very nicely. As a military brat and then musician and traveling salesperson, you have to be pretty adaptable. A lot of people in sales you'll find with this real strong temperament as a sanguine as well. So that adaptability puts you in a position to where you're able to mold to the environments that are around you. Multicultural, if you're open-minded, of course. There's those closed-minded sides that separate people, and of course I'm about unity. So I like the idea that I've experienced so many different cultures that I can, I've kind of, even in my comedy that I do as a comedian, I've got multiple different accents that I'll do, and you'll find me doing all kinds of crazy stuff throughout the day.
Even answering the phone that way.
You'll find me answering the phone that way. You'll find me talking to telemarketers in accents. So, but really that adaptability was necessary as a child, being in so many different environments. So we'll talk another segment, and the next segment and the last one, the supine, we'll talk about how that kind of fits in there as well, with the lack of adaptability that comes with the supine, which is an inner conflict that it creates when you have multiple temperaments and the polarities cross and you kind of have stuff inside yourself you don't like. So strong inner child, we talked about that. That kind of fits into that wide-eyed and seemingly innocent. So we already talked about that. Creativity we talked about when it comes to all of these different ways that they become the storyteller, and that creativity. We talked about a lot of the things that I can now count as either talents or skills because I've either developed them or they can naturally, as a natural creativity. For some reason, I can rhyme like Susian style with no effort. So it's pretty great because people enjoy my writing. So, or so I've been told. So, volunteers gladly, finds jobs easily. That's one of the ways they find jobs so easily is by volunteering gladly, being malleable and adaptable to whatever environment is necessary to get the job done. And of course, bosses like that. The danger with the sanguine is that they get bored with the job and then they have to move on because they've learned everything that they can at that job. And now it's boring and monotonous. So they find themselves slow paced and out of a job for being bored. So danger on the negative side. But again, on the positive side is here where we are finding jobs easily. I've always found it pretty easy to find a job. It's just finding the right job as I've always had the difficulty doing. It is one of the reasons why I'm trying to get the funding to do all the things that I do anyway. Because like a good friend, Douglas Blankenship, says, you got to have money to make money. And I don't have any money. So it would definitely be nice to be able to put some funding into these things. Anyway, moving forward, colorful. Remember that story I told about the mountains and driving through on the motorcycle and enjoying that time and being able to be colorful with the story that I told and giving those details to embellish the mindset into believing the story that I was presenting. Idea driven. Of course, you'll find a lot of my ideas here on Facebook, and you'll find them on the social media pages. You'll find not just my ideas, but my expansion on those ideas. And on my website, kickershaver.com, you'll find a lot of those. So idea driven as in looking for new ideas constantly as well. Visually stimulated, you will find, because the colorful mindset and the overload of information that happens around someone, you'll find that visual stimulation, audio visual stimulation even I'm glad that's under there, the sensory really, not just visual, but let's just say sensory stimulated. And remember, I'm going to jump that back over onto the strength side where that appreciative of beauty, where that's where kind of a lot of these fit in, where the colorful visual audio stimulated. So those fit all right in there. Intriguing, charming, promoter, inspire of community inclusion, leading by example. Those I want to lead by example and jump into the intriguing, charming, promoter, inspire. That really kind of fits into the life of environments, things that we talked about earlier, and especially to that encourager, someone who brings the encouragements along and makes you more and more charming. I love the way that Ellen DeGeneres offers a compliment. Even if she's making a joke, she makes a joke that's lifting someone up, not tearing them down. So makes her that much more charming and likable. And of course, there's other examples if you're a sanguine yourself operating in your strength. So inspire of community inclusion, that ability to draw an audience and keep their attention is going to tie in right there. Leads by example, and this is an area where, there are natural born leaders that we talked about in this first episode of the Claire. And the natural born leader, it's innate in them to lead, whether they lead by example or whether they lead by dictatorship. So that's leader dictatorship mentality. The sanguine is more going to lead by example in the idea that if they're going to be followed, it's going to be because people like to do what they're doing, not because they are going to issue commandments and really even prefer to offer instruction. Going back over to that side of strategy and planning, that weakness kind of puts that leader in the position to really want to do what they do and have other people follow along because it's the smartest course of action, as opposed to someone who demands the authority and leads the people around them. So leading by example in that regard is specific to the sanguine temperament, where the other is specific to choleric. I definitely wanted to make that distinction. So moving on to the last column, here we go. I don't know how long we've been going here.
An hour and 40.
Hour and 40. It's going to be a 2-hour segment. So here we go. Make friends easily. That really kind of ties into the stuff we've already said over here, so we can move on through there. Loves variety, fits into the adaptability. Adores praise, that fits into kind of a negative as well. Of course, the search for praise in doing positive things for your surroundings is not necessarily, remember we talked about the craving, so the adoration for it is good, and it's good to have it as a food source when it comes to liking being appreciated, but not needing it as such a way as to crave it. So the adoration for it being on the appreciation side, the craving being on the addictive side of it. So to make that differentiation, exciting to be around. That really fits into the life to environments, easily envied. And mind you, the ones that typically envy the sanguine that's leading by example finds them to be the ones that are considered all talk, that they consider them to be the narcissist, the sociopath, the egotistical, the ones that envy the sanguine when they're operating in their strength. Now, mind you, of course, there's the flip side when they're actually behaving that way. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the sanguine operating in their strength. So they don't hold grudges. Their memory is very fortunate for that, because they can go out into the world and look back and forget altogether events that might have occurred that caused some negative relationship. They would forget altogether whatever it caused it, so they would just jump right back into the relationship without having any grudges to hold. This is a really great strength to have for anybody, and I highly recommend that everybody adopts it. Be quick to admit it when you find out you're wrong. Okay? And it starts with being willing to be wrong. You evaluate your truth constantly when other people offer opinions and consider whether there's any validity to it. And then if you disqualify it, that's up to you, but give yourself the chance to be wrong so that you can be corrected and correct your own behavior and apologize when it's necessary so that you can move through any harm that your confusion or wrongdoing led to the people around you feeling. So that's for everybody to do as a strength, but really it's pretty innate in the sanguine. Sanguine really enjoys being liked, enjoys praise, and really hates the idea of being disliked outside of their own mindset of people who they do enjoy being envied. They enjoy being envied because, of course, it means that you have something that they want and they don't necessarily have it. So even the screen's trying to shut me up here. So, but again, we're still talking. So, doesn't hold grudges, thrives on chaos and spontaneous actions. Mm-hmm. That's on strengths, but of course, you got to balance that stuff. These are people you might find jumping off of canyon walls with a parachute, or jumping off a building with a parachute or bungee cord, or, not that all temperaments don't do those types of things, but more to the fact that thriving on spontaneous activities, it can be a negative if you're after things that are not good for you. But here's why it's in the positive column. The thriving on chaos and spontaneous actions can put you in a position to where everything in life is an adventure. And it's a great place for me to have my sign off, because we were in a situation just at the beginning of this year, and we're only, we're the 4th month today into this year, 2019, and we are 8 months away from Perfect Vision 2020. So I like to say it's going to be the year of hindsight. So anyway, we were in a situation, I think we did a broadcast about it as well, where the car was impounded and taken away by the police department, and way too many police officers showed up and bullied the car away and treated us like criminals, all based off of a false tip that said that I was driving erratically in a parking lot. And it didn't occur. Didn't even get to have the fun of spinning the car in circles. And they still took it. So it left us in the, nighttime in the rain here in way down in Temecula, California. And instead of allowing the severe frustration of having to go the next couple of months without a vehicle, and I got to do a broadcast also on that as well. So I'm gonna make this quick because the phone's gonna die. We made it into an adventure. So it was a chaotic thing that happened, and it was definitely a spontaneous action. But we were